I mean, if you're using it as a shortcut and you're not ethical about it, you're not disclosing your use of AI, you will, it's going to catch up. And whether it's just a customer dissatisfaction or whether the government, is going to hit you with a fine, you want to make sure that you're playing by the rules and that you're not exposing yourself to, greater risk just by, trying to leverage this technology without truly understanding it.
Welcome back to Between Fires and Futures. I'm your host, Tonya Terrell, and today we're tackling one of the most urgent questions IT leaders are facing right now. Where do I even start with AI? Boards are asking for AI strategies, budgets are under pressure, and leaders are being told to do AI without a clear playbook. And that's why I'm so excited about today's guest, Josh Einstein, cloud architect, software developer, and AI engineer at ConRes IT Solutions. Josh got his start during the dot-com boom of the 90s, working with innovative startups before moving into telecommunications. And as an early adopter of emerging technologies, he's designed and built solutions for smartphones, tablets, voice over IP, social media, cloud, and now AI, often years before those technologies hit the mainstream. Today, he leverages that experience to help customers build the next generation of AI-powered solutions. And in this episode, Josh is breaking down how IT leaders can take the first step with AI, from identifying the right use case to testing it in 90 days to showing the kind of results your executive leadership will actually care about. So I'm ready to dive in. Josh, welcome.
Hey, welcome. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here for this because the line we hear from IT leaders all the time is, something along the lines of, I don't know what I don't know, but we're being told there's a directive to do AI, to leverage AI in the business, and I have no idea where to start. And I feel like there's so much hype out there. Everyone knows they need to be leveraging AI, but the question is, where do you actually start? What's the use case that's going to move the business forward? So that's exactly what I want to unpack today. So when IT leaders are handed this directive, like we need an AI strategy, go figure it out. They're not given a playbook. And if that's the starting point, what should they think about and do first?
Yeah, you're right. And we hear that a lot. Customers will come to us and just say, we're getting pressure from above to what is our AI strategy, whether that be, dealing with, kind of like the shadow IT problem where their employees are using IT or using AI rather, to do their job. And maybe the business is not ready to, they have compliance policies in place that, so whether they're trying to address their employees' usage of AI, or they're just trying to say, how can we get on this bandwagon? How can we leverage this technology to, increase our revenue or decrease our costs? And so the type of work that I do, I deal with customers in a lot of different industries, and I'm obviously not an expert in all of them. So one of the things that we do is we look to what others in the industry are doing, and we basically look at it like a software problem more than an AI problem. Take a look at the business use case. What are some of the things that your employees are doing on a day-to-day basis? And that's more of like a consultation, pretty much to understand and learn what a day in the life of that employee or a particular team or the company in general looks like. And we're not experts in food packaging industry or the legal industry, but we're able to look and see, take a look at what are some of the problems that you guys are, not necessarily problems, but what are some of the most, time consuming or tedious things. And we look at, business use cases. And I often say, it's about so much more than just chatbots. That's, something that comes up a lot, but really it's about taking a look at, trying to understand the customer and understanding, what it is, what are your frustrations, how can we apply this technology to you? But yeah, it's pretty much it's a process of getting to know that customer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is it fair to say, a customer really could ask themselves, what are the biggest business challenges that we need to tackle this year or this quarter? and sort of reverse engineer an AI solution for that? I mean, is that a realistic, is that an approach that you see sort of backing into use cases?
Yeah, I mean, it's a it's a process of hearing, what are some of the business objectives? What are they? Because hopefully they come to us with some type of idea of, what can be improved in their business, and then we can take a look at what are the available technologies today, and how can that be applied to this? Whether it's summarization or categorization or transcription or translation, things there's like various capabilities that we know that exist today that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and how can we apply
Yeah.
those? Either a combination of that or sometimes it involves something totally novel, but those use cases are a little bit more rare. If um, haven't really had anybody come to us asking us to cure cancer yet, but
Right.
um, they're trying to solve some of the more
Yeah.
the low hanging fruit.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. And yeah, I mean, not every problem is going to be an AI problem, but what would you say is the quickest way to spot a good first use case for, an IT leader who's been given this directive?
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, and sometimes that is the case. You'll have that conversation with the customer and say, hey, this actually could be solved with an off the shelf product that really isn't AI. It's more about automation, and sometimes there's AI components to that. But I think really you look at like high volume repetitive tasks that can be automated, and things that maybe would be difficult to do previously that are now a little bit with the capability of the models out there, like reasoning models or the language understanding, things that would have been difficult to write in code are problems that are better solved with AI. So now we can take a look at automating some of those things that were previously a lot more difficult to automate.
Yeah. Yeah. And, as a CEO, I can tell you that because we're heavily involved in AI initiatives for our organization, and for us, it's been challenging because there are so many things that we could do with AI that would enable the business, that would offer new lines of revenue for us, that, I just feel like the use cases are almost endless. That for us, it's been really essential to set like the outcome metrics so that we can see where to focus our time, our efforts. Like, where do we want to start first with AI? What's going to be the biggest impact to the business? And just as you said, I have this big dream of having AI agents who can perform the services that our human team performs, but like that's next year. We're not starting there. We really started with what are the repetitive things that could be automated, and so those were the quick wins that we started with first. So it's been my own experience just as a CEO in our small company.
Yeah, I
But
mean, definitely it's those repeatable, well documented processes. Those are going to be the easiest to tackle because that's often the biggest challenge of that is like just trying to understand. I mean, humans are very complex. We're able to think on the fly, and we're getting there with AI. But in designing a solution like this, you really have to be able to understand the process from start to finish. And a lot of people aren't there yet. They haven't put that much thought into it in documenting a process, and that's kind of the first step.
yeah. So when you look across industries, what starter use cases do you feel like just come up over and over again? And these are probably use cases that I would think would deliver value fast. So what starter use cases come up again and again?
The one that comes up all the time, and I say it's been done to death, and like as you mentioned in your intro, that I'm always kind of looking at cutting edge technology. So one of the things we hear a lot about are chatbots, and I think they've been done to death, and I think that's the fascination with that is going to wear off. But what it really boils down to is an information retrieval problem, right? So
Mhm.
people are it's almost like they're looking to replace or augment the search engine that we've become so accustomed to, and so that's something that comes up a lot. Is I want to be able to talk to this chatbot about my industry or my data or specific topics that I want to make it an expert on, and that's I mean that's that's done a lot. But I think that's really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that I think we're seeing more with even with the classic machine learning, which
Mhm.
classification, summarization, things like that that are just they're kind of old school. I mean, we've been doing them for a while, or time series forecasting, things like that. Those have been done for a while, but they're getting a lot better now. That in conjunction with the generative AI, I think some of the more exciting use cases are yet to be seen. Obviously, agentic AI is a really big it's a hot topic now,
Yeah.
but going back to what I said earlier, it's like it's hard to build an agentic AI solution until you've documented and really perfected a process. So I think we're starting to just see that now, some more exciting use cases emerging.
Yeah. What I'm just curious, like what are some of those exciting use cases that you're seeing?
I've kind of described it as almost like taking an LLM and it being like a new type of CPU almost. I
Mhm.
mean, if you give it all these different operations that it can do, and here's your input, and you're basically relying on it to conduct the logic and which operations to call, things like that. You're going to be able to see. For example, we had one customer that I talked to recently that they spent an inordinate amount of time scouring the web for um, regulatory changes, things that are, and these are not things that are published, right? It's just things that they find about it through the news or through, government posting a bulletin, and this is going to affect their business. Well, they have a team of people that just scours the internet looking for these, you know, news articles or things coming out of the White House and trying to read it and decipher what that means to them. And I'm like, well, this is something that we could really apply with an agentic AI solution. It's basically like a smart web scraper that has the ability to comprehend and understand that content and then turn it into structured information that can then be
Mhm.
passed up the chain.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I'm so excited about agentic AI and even what it's going to do for our business. But we're hearing all kinds of really cool use cases with the IT leaders in our community, and hearing these use cases, it makes me realize the world that we live in, even a year from now, and definitely 2 years from now, is just a completely different, maybe even unrecognizable world. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think you're right. And it's exciting, but it's also scary. I mean, when you think about just how good some of, image generation and video generation is getting, where
Yeah.
it's like, it's almost like we're evolving in a way to kind of detect, to sniff this stuff out as humans, what's real and what isn't. So there's that aspect of it, but I do think that it's, and like I've told everyone, I kind of compare this to the dot-com boom, right? When that
Hmm.
first came out, we're like, well, is the internet going to be around forever? Is it really applicable to my business? And like, well, what do we have an internet strategy? Well, you don't think about that anymore because it's just everywhere. It's just a part of
Right.
your life. It's
Yeah.
just literally everything. And I think, and nobody talks about how exciting the internet is anymore.
Right.
It's just there. It's fabric. And I think that's really how AI is going to be. And, we'll always, see people pushing that envelope, but I think it's just going to become one of those things that is just kind of woven into a lot of the processes and applications that we develop.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think back to like the the early days of the internet. And back then, I think most of us couldn't imagine a world where it is everywhere. It's the fabric of every business, um, and honestly, every consumer. And I feel like as we look forward to AI, it's going to be the same thing. Like we can't even conceive of the things that it will do for us as as business leaders, as even consumers. So it's such an exciting time to be alive and in the tech space. So if an IT leader wants to show progress this quarter, how do they test if an idea is doable in 90 days or less?
Great question. I think what we see a lot of customers doing is prototyping their solutions in the cloud.
Mhm.
Um, Now, I'm a little biased because I'm a cloud engineer at the company ConRes where I work. However, we also have data center team. We sell hardware infrastructure, but I'm on the cloud team, so um, I I see customers that otherwise would not have looked at the cloud now looking to move a lot more of their workloads there just because it's so much quicker to get up and running. Now, granted, it's going to be more costly in the long run,
Yeah.
and it may not be appropriate for a production product, but definitely starting out in the cloud allows you to get started with building on top of some of the work that's already been done. I mean, there's high level APIs where you can you don't have to worry about model loading and context length and how to manage state. Like all that stuff is just kind of done for you. So there's those high level APIs. So that's a good way to get started. But I think it's really about building on what other people have already done and start with something small. Like I said, something repetitive and low impact. Right? You don't want to try and change the world with your first AI project. You don't want to do something that if it fails, it's going to sink your business. You want
Right.
to start with something pretty mundane, right? And that is not going to have a significant impact on the success of your business, but it could have a tremendous benefit if it succeeds, but it's not going to kill you if it doesn't. Because I think a lot of companies are still kind of just figuring out where they can apply this, and I wouldn't say bet the company on it. Definitely start with something bite sized, especially if you're
Yeah.
trying to get that done in 90 days.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important for IT leaders to hear that, you don't have to start with a moonshot. Start with something that clears bottlenecks or saves hours every week. Something kind of unsexy. Uh, like you said, mundane, but that's how you get credibility and buy-in for bigger projects later as well. So I know that ConRes has designed a staged way to help organizations start small and scale up, like something like a 2-day readiness assessment, 1 week use case prioritization, 4-week deeper roadmap. Can you walk us through how that works and why breaking it down that way matters for IT leaders who really just feel the pressure to show something this quarter?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've obviously, every customer is different. The level of effort for every customer is going to be different. They're different sizes. There's different levels of commitment. But we broke those down into three different offerings because it's easier to kind of, I guess, to sell. To put
Yeah.
these are the deliverables and put it on marketing material. So we've got those three offerings. The 2-day the 2-day workshop is going to be basically going back to what we talked about earlier, just trying to figure out, well, if a customer doesn't really have an idea of use cases, right? What can we do to improve the efficiency in our business or to reduce costs? Um, that's a process of, like I said, getting to know that customer, getting to understand what the day in the life of their employees looks like, and then
Mhm.
figuring out ways that we can apply that technology to that. The more in-depth assessments that are 1 week or 1 month, those are going to involve more teams. They're going to involve more, I guess, more planning. The deliverable for that might be like a 90-day plan. Like, we're going to develop this application. At the end of it, we're going to prioritize these use cases and figure out, come up with estimations of, all right, well, this is what we think your ROI is going to be. This is how many hours we think it's going to save you. This is how long we think it's going to take to develop, and here's how many developers would be needed for it. So it's more about fleshing out a solution, and then the 1 month assessment is really just kind of a really detailed. We're learning a new industry, or not a new industry, but we're learning how your specific business functions within this industry, and we're going to come up with something very tailored and potentially have a proof of concept built and deployed to show you that this will either work or it won't work. The technology's not there yet, which sometimes is the case.
Yeah. No, I love that breakdown because I feel like it's realistic. Like IT leaders can sort of dip their toes in with a short assessment and then build confidence with a more scoped plan and finally get that roadmap or playbook that they are lacking right now. And I think it makes the journey just tangible and actionable versus overwhelming, which I think a lot of them are feeling right now. So, what would you say are the common traps you see when teams rush into AI without a plan? What should they be
Mm.
looking out for?
Well, there was a study recently, I forget where it came out of, that was something like 90% of AI projects fail.
Yeah, I
And
saw that.
I think it really is about trying to bite off too much too soon. That's probably the biggest reason to fail. But also not having a good idea or a good handle on the data. I mean, the quality of data is paramount to, a successful solution. And you can't just take, all right, thousands or millions of scanned PDFs and dump them into a folder and then just say, all right, index this into a vector database. And now we've got an expert chatbot on, I don't know, car insurance. It's, you know what I mean? It's like, you have to really understand the data, and it's got to be properly labeled. It's got to be properly parsed. I mean, you'd be surprised if you ever took a look at a contract, right? How much like important information is actually on that contract? Probably 2 pages, and the rest is a bunch of boilerplate, right? So if you just take
Right.
that 50-page contract and upload it and let it index it, well, now you've got a whole bunch of data that has absolutely nothing to do with the customer or the services provided. Really, that information is somewhere located in specific parts of that. So it's about not just a naive dump all our data into this. You have to properly structure it, and sometimes that involves using AI. Using AI to improve the quality of your data. So that's another another way to get there. But so I think trying to bite off too much, not having a good handle on your data, and probably three, not thinking about the security aspect of it.
Mm,
Um, I mean, I could talk about that for an hour, but I mean, this is the kind of technology where it's, like SQL injection attacks were, the big topic, 20 years ago when people figured out that they could just type random strings into input fields, and a whole bunch of naive developers coded it just so they would send it to a database, and that, those vulnerabilities were all over the place. Well, just imagine how many will be all over the place if you've got companies that are just naively sending input to a language model without properly scrubbing it for,
mhm.
prompt injection attacks or, other types of jailbreaks, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about this data readiness for a moment because, like as an organization, we've definitely lived that. And I was reading a Google like organizational readiness for AI report, and it talks about fragmented data silos, the poor data quality, and lack of governance as just consistent obstacles. And I think many people, IT leaders included, um, myself included, underestimate the time and effort it just takes to just get the data in shape. And if data readiness is ignored, even small pilots, you know, at best get delayed or at worst fail. So, how do you recommend IT leaders audit data readiness? And what would you say are the minimum standards that you would insist upon before moving from idea to pilot?
Well, you should be able to know at least where all the data lives. Because a lot of times it's just sitting in random SharePoint sites or you know, file shares on a network. You should have an idea of where everything is, and maybe catalog that to say that this is where the contracts are. This is where the engineer biographies are located. This is who has access to it. Auditing the access to that. That's another thing that I didn't touch on in the security part of this, but it's like um, if you, a lot of people don't realize just how much data is overshared, and that might not be evident until you add it to an AI solution where all of a sudden it's like surfacing executive salaries to, you know, frontline workers because they're interacting with a chatbot that happens to have access to that. So auditing the security of the data and making sure that it's able to be processed and structured in a way that whatever system you're using, whether it be computer vision or a language model, that you're not just feeding it, like I said, the 50-page PDF. You should have a good idea of like where the most important and pertinent information is in this data and focus on that. The other thing I would say is that like, cleaning up data, there's probably going to be a part of it that's a manual process, but anything that's a manual process, try to automate it because, what happens when you finish cleaning up that terabyte of data, you're still adding new data. You're still
Right.
building that data set continues to grow, and you can't just have a human being go and repeat those manual tasks. So try to, whatever you do, make it repeatable, so that as new data comes in, that cleanup and that fix up can be done on that as well.
That makes complete sense. And beyond the data readiness, what are some of the other simple ways to know if your organization is even ready, um, like in terms of people or governance or like security, before you pick a use case? What's important for an IT leader to think about?
Well, I mean, this is something that we have to deal with internally as well, and it's review your customer contracts, because you may have customer contracts that say you can't use any of their data in um, cloud or cloud-based AI systems. It might all have to take place in your data center, or it might not be able to be sent overseas. And if you're just sending data naively to a hosted DeepSeek model or something like that, you might be feeding that data to the Chinese government. So take a look at your customer contracts, audit whether or not you may have to tag customers and like, all right, we can use AI for this customer, but not this customer, or we can only use US based hosted models for this solution, or all this has to take place within our data center. So as far as governance goes, you definitely want to involve your legal team in that, to make sure that you're not getting yourself in any hot water, because you expose yourself to liability. These are not perfect systems. And if it fails, and when it fails, because there's an element of randomness to all of this, it's
Mm-hmm.
never going to be perfect. And what is the exposure? What is the risk of if one of these systems fails? So you don't want to, for example, have AI controlling, I don't know, traffic lights or something like that without some type of human in the loop, or some type of
Right.
factor to kind of check its work.
Yeah, that's something we've been talking about internally a lot, with all of our, AI initiatives. We are launching the agents next year. We've got some sales enablement AI tools for our clients, and the one repetitive thing that I was talking about is our write up automation to transcribe the lead notes for our clients. And one of the things that has really been eye-opening to me in chatting with our CTO is that, like, we never want a human out of the loop. So there is a human overviewer on each of those initiatives. Um, and so I think that was something, just as a leader with big dreamy eyes about what AI could do for us, was surprising to learn, is that it is really important that we have, a human oversight for each one of those initiatives.
Yeah, and not just that, but an audit trail,
Yeah.
so that when and if it does go wrong, you can find out why, right? And is this our liability? Is it something that the vendor is responsible for? Just having or if there's just like you would with a firewall, right? If you get hacked, right, you want to be able to look at the firewall logs and see, well, who got in, what did they get? You want a similar type of audit trail with AI. And
Right.
you make a great point about the human in the loop. I think a lot of times people look at AI as like, all right, all our jobs are going away. They're going to be replaced by machines. I don't really look at it that way. I feel like it's just like the internet. It's going to enable new jobs. It's going to make us more efficient at what we do. But this idea that we're all going to be like, in that movie Wall-E, just sitting around
Yeah.
while robots are taking care of us. I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime. I hope it doesn't. But um, yeah, it's a tool, right? It's a tool.
Yeah.
It's an efficiency. It's an improvement to efficiency, but I don't think it's a replacement for complex human decision making.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think a human always needs to be in the loop. And I also think, I mean, my hope for it is that it takes care a lot of the work that humans don't really enjoy doing, and it frees up human potential and human creativity, which would be amazing.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that we're seeing a lot with generative images and video. It's like, can AI create some pretty believable images?
Hmm.
Yeah, sure, it can. And it's going to probably replace things like stock photos, but how creative were stock photos really to begin with? It's
Yeah.
not, it's not a replacement for human creativity. I think if you saw a completely AI generated movie, it would be the worst movie you ever saw. Um, just that element of human creativity is, I think we're a long way from being able to replace that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that is my hope for AI is it just frees us up to be more creative, to be more innovative and to leverage it to do that. So let's say that, a CTO has got his data ready. He's launched a pilot. And we've heard that statistic like 90 something percent of pilots don't move into production or 90 something percent of pilots fail. But let's say that, an IT leader has proven a quick win. How do they then turn that into a repeatable playbook instead of just a one off science project?
Yeah, I guess just like any software project, you have to think about it in terms of the scale, right? Because a lot of times that quick win, like I alluded to earlier, you can use those high level APIs in the cloud, and it's great that you don't have to write that much code, but you're kind of locked into those, and they're often at a much higher cost than you could do it by just hiring some developers to write some Python code and do it on prem. So definitely take a look at how this is going to scale. A lot of times we run into situations where the pilot project works great because there's 10 people using it, but now you want to scale up to 1,000 and
Mm-hmm.
you just don't have the resources, even in the cloud. If you try to, you might just be running into rate limits or um, quota limits that you're hitting. And, I mean, there's not infinite supply, right? So you have to
Right.
either make sure that you've locked in a infrastructure that can scale with it, and in a way that's going to be cost effective, because that pilot program may work great, but just like with any software project, it's it always works great in the beta, everybody loves it, and then when you roll it out to production, that's when all the bugs come out.
Mm-hmm.
Have a plan for that, and maybe don't scale from 10 users to 1,000, maybe gradually scale out.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Great advice. And I like that. I think, AI, I think to a lot of people feels so like unknown territory. But we all have dealt with software projects. So I love that we can relate it to something that we already have a framework for understanding. Um, and my next question really is like, what are the success signals? What should an IT leader be able to hand executive leadership as proof that their AI project is worth the investment?
Yeah, well, you should be able to quantify what the business objective was. We were processing our ticket processing time was 2 hours. Now it's down to an hour. Um, that's a quantifiable metric that you can measure and say, maybe do A/B testing. The tickets that were processed through this AI system were handled 50% faster than the ones that weren't. So definitely have a measure of the success of that can be quantified and shown on a chart. Executives love to see charts. Um, so not just that, but also keep an eye on the costs and say, all right, well, yeah, we got um, you know 50% better efficiency, but what did it cost us? And is that worth it, right? Because that's going to be
Yeah.
it's going to be a variable in whether or not you scale this out, whether the pilot was a success or not. Does you no good to process orders in half the time if it's costing you more than it would have cost to double the number of representatives that you have answering calls. So you want to make sure that it's a cost win and the customer success. Get feedback, gather feedback from the end users. Was this experience better than your previous experiences? Are you What frustrated you about this? Definitely constantly get feedback from your end users, because that's going to be quantifiable and measurable. And you might find that, yeah, I mean, the system achieved its objectives, but it pissed everybody off in the process, and that's not good either.
Right. Great. Yeah, I was reading McKinsey, a report talking about, organizations that are actually getting real value from AI are the ones that are setting well-defined KPIs and objectives prior to the pilot, and that you're tracking those well-defined KPIs and operate to a clear adoption roadmap, which is exactly what a 90-day pilot should force you to do. And yes, boards don't want to see demos. They care about outcomes. Like executive leadership cares about outcomes, hours saved, errors reduced, dollars avoided or added. Um, and I think also with that, executives want to know risk is covered, right? And you spoke a little bit about security, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that in terms of, data quality, privacy, security, governance. Um, I know that, it feels like all the time we are seeing more and more regulation come out around this. So, and because we are so early in the AI journey overall, um, how concerned should an IT leader be about that? And, how do they stay on top of that? Security, governance, compliance, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, as with most things, the security aspect of it tends to be an afterthought, and that's unfortunate because it's you don't want to find out that you didn't give it enough thought after you've already been exploited, or after you've already been slapped with sanctions or penalties from a government because while you were developing this product, some new law came out that made it so that you have to do things a little differently. Who knows? But the security should be thought of throughout the entire process, and it's important to understand that there are new types of threats with this, and some of them that are just completely out of your control. You can't take just any off-the-shelf model and look inside of it and see the data it was trained on. I mean, you can get some idea, like by just creative prompting, but there's no way to tell whether or not, you're using a model that was trained on copyrighted data, and you're going to get slapped with a lawsuit someday when Congress catches up and they're like, well, this model was trained on stolen books, so, and you've been generating content from it. The legal industry, particularly, they have to be very, very careful. I saw a couple days ago, like one of the largest fines that was slapped on an attorney for submitting an appellate brief that contained made up citations. You would,
Oh, wow.
and you got to think about, like, I mean, yeah, that's hugely embarrassing for the attorney, but also imagine the client, that now it's like,
Yeah.
well, you charged me for 10 hours, but you wrote this
Right.
in 10 minutes. You, I mean, if you're using it as a shortcut and you're not ethical about it, and you're not disclosing your use of AI, you will, it's going to catch up. And um, whether it's just a customer dissatisfaction or whether the government, is going to hit you with a fine, you want to make sure that you're playing by the rules and that you're not exposing yourself to greater risk just by trying to leverage this technology without truly understanding it. Because, like I said, there's a whole new category of threats that come with, particularly language models. But any type of any type of AI model is subject to hallucinations, things like that, or deliberate
Mhm.
tampering, and you have to be able to more creatively. Um, Meta, the big leader in AI, Facebook parent company, they've done some great work with a model called Llama Guard, which is basically a model that sits in front of another model, and it basically just analyzes the inputs and the outputs and says, all right, I'm going to categorize I'm going to give you a score on the inputs of this as to whether or not I think it's trying to tamper, whether or not it's, obscene, or whether it violates content policies, and not just checking the inputs, but also checking the outputs. Because let's say someone get past that or the model just goes crazy and starts to generate something that, it shouldn't. Llama Guard's going to watch it on the input and the output. And it's not perfect, but it's going to get you, it's going to catch a lot of things that your, simple regular expression is not
Mhm.
going to catch. So,
Yeah. Um, what's one myth about getting started with AI that you'd love to kill right now, Josh?
hmm. um, programmers are going away. I think, or that, and like I kind of alluded to it earlier, that I think
Yeah.
it's like, I think the big myth is that we can just erase, just cut the cost of all these pesky
Right.
humans. I don't think that it's going to be the vast job killer that they think it's going to. I think it's going to be more of a, jobs are going to change. They're going
Yeah.
to get shifted around. but I think it will. I don't think it's the doomsday that a lot of people think it is. I also don't think it's the panacea that a lot of people assume that, use the right tool for the right job. Don't just try to um, delegate to a language model something that can be done with code.
Right.
It's a lot cheaper to do it with code than to run it on very expensive GPUs. So I think those two myths are really kind of how I would describe the you asked for the biggest myth, but I'm going to give you the two ones that it's doomsday, or that it's the greatest thing ever. I think it's kind
Yeah.
of truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you're right. But I feel like that's a myth. The it is sort of the savior of everything. That's a myth that so many people, myself included, until we really started going down this path, that you could just drop AI into a process and it'll magically fix everything. And the truth is, AI just amplifies whatever you give it. Whether so, if the data or the process is broken, the outcome is also broken. And we've learned that recently. Um,
Yeah, it's. I mean, and coding is one of those things that I know I mentioned that I started off with that like it's going to eliminate all the programmers, but that's one of those things where every day I keep hearing programmers are out of work because this model is so good at writing code. I would love for this thing I would love to just be able to describe an application and have it just spit out a working application. It's not there yet, and it may never be there.
yeah.
It's a great accelerator. It's a great tool. Um, but it's not just push a button, get an app. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that word accelerator, I think that's the best way to think about it, right? Think of AI as an accelerator, not a band aid. Um, and the other myth that I just keep hearing, because I'm having a lot of these conversations, I'm inviting guests on the podcast to talk about this because it is such a uh, issue, and it's something IT leaders really want to learn about. But one of the complaints that we are hearing is that in organizations, AI is being treated like an IT only project. And the reality is, the business stakeholders really need to be at the table from day one, because the real wins are about business outcomes, not just models. It's not about AI. It's about what it can do for your business. And so that's something I'd love to hear your thoughts on, your experience with your customers, because it's definitely something that we're hearing a lot, that executive leadership is giving this directive: go do AI. Um, and it is treated as an IT project, but it really isn't, or it shouldn't be.
No, no, you're absolutely right, and that's something that we've had to address and evolve internally as well. Because at ConRes, we typically deal with IT, right? They're ordering infrastructure, or cloud services, or networking, whatever. It's like we're dealing with IT, and our sales reps are used to talking to IT. But you're right that in the AI space, IT is often at the end of that, where, okay, now we need to deploy it. How do we run it? The real conversation, the initial conversations really need to be had with the stakeholders, the executive leadership. You need buy-in from them, and the individual end users that are going to be using, and whose processes you're trying to streamline, because you
Mhm.
have to. There needs to be buy-in. Honestly, buy-in from IT is not. I mean, I'm not trying to diminish IT. Obviously, they're critical in a successful AI deployment, but their buy-in is not as important as buy-in from the stakeholders and the executives and the teams that are they're carrying out these manual processes. Because IT is going to get it done. They always do. That's what they do. They find a way to fit the things in the rack. They find a way to get everything wired up, and obviously we help with that too. It's what we do. It's our bread and butter. But this is a new type of conversation that we're having, and um, it really starts well before IT. Um,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of
And
these
I was reading
solutions.
about that, that the AI pilots fail. Like, I think it's 91% of AI pilots fail, or something to that regard. Um, and a large part of that failure is that thinking, that sort of buying into that myth that it is an IT project. And so they're not necessarily getting executive sponsorship, and then things get stuck in pilot and don't move to production. So yeah, this has been hugely helpful because this is exactly what our audience is telling us all the time. And I appreciate this conversation because you really cut through the hype, and I think it really gives IT leaders the playbook they've been asking for, which is like, where do we start? How do we prove it in 90 days? And how do we build momentum that actually lasts and moves pilots into production? So thank you so much for that. And
Thank you.
for those listening, I know the AI noise is and can be overwhelming. Everybody's saying you need to move fast, but few are showing you how to move smart. And that's why, if this conversation was helpful, I'd love for you to head over to technologymatch.com and check out ConRes's AI assessment in our marketplace. If you just type in AI assessment, it'll be the first thing to pop up. And it's designed to show you exactly where you stand today and give you a clear, structured next step, as Josh outlined. And I'll link it in the show notes so you can grab it easily. But thank you for tuning in to Between Fires and Futures, and share this with another IT leader who's being told to do AI but doesn't know where to start. Appreciate you listening. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. Great conversation.